Butternut squash and apple soup is easy and delicious. If you like sweet things like I do, then this recipe is perfect. It's also really versatile because it could be a side dish or a main course, and you could also make it vegan, vegetarian, or you could do what I'm going to do and you could add chicken and use chicken broth. The main star of the show is, of course, the butternut squash. What I did is I took one small butternut squash and I cut off the long end and I peeled it. Altogether, before I roasted the squash, I had just over a pound, 500 grams. What I did is I took the peeled butternut squash and I sliced it into slices that were 1/2 inch thick. I took a tablespoon of butter and rubbed it on the top and the bottom. I didn't use all of the butter. What's left over I'll put into the soup later. And I roasted the butternut squash in a 400-degree Fahrenheit oven for 45 minutes, turning every 15 minutes. So I turned it 3 times. Although you could definitely just open a bag of frozen butternut squash, about a pound, and put it into some water, some chicken or vegetable stock, I highly recommend that you roast the butternut squash because roasting butternut squash really brings out the flavor. And of course I'm going to add apple. Here I have 1 medium golden delicious apple. Most recipes seem to call for Granny Smith, some for a sweet apple like Gala. I really like golden delicious because it's a good middle ground between sweetness and tartness. I'm also going to add some onion and garlic. Here I have one, I'd say somewhere between small and medium onion finely chopped and 1 large clove of garlic finely chopped. In this pot I have about 3 cups of my homemade vegetable stock. I took 2 chicken leg quarters, took off the skin, and boiled them with carrot, celery, garlic, onion, and bay leaf. To start the soup, I'm going to add the garlic, the onion, and the apple to my chicken stock, and I'm going to boil it for probably 15 minutes. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the apple, and notice I'm not peeling the apple. I'm leaving the peel on. I'm trying to get the garlic, the onion, and the apple nice and soft so that when I add the roasted butternut squash, it doesn't have to cook for very long. And then I can just put in my immersion blender. The squash is going to get soft quickly. The apple and everything will get soft and start to fall apart because I'm giving it a head start. And it's all going to blend together in creamy deliciousness. It's been about 5 minutes, and now the chicken broth with the apples, the onion, and the garlic has come to a boil. So I'm going to turn the heat down to medium, gas mark 3 out of 6, and let this boil for probably 15 to 20 minutes. I'll keep an eye on it. I got busy with something, so it's actually been about 20 minutes, and the apples here are really soft. Here I can take a piece of apple and crush it against the side, and you can see it falls apart. Even the skin is starting to get nice and soft. This smells amazing. The chicken stock, the apples, the garlic, the onion. This is going to be delicious. Now it's time to add my oven roasted butternut squash. You can see it's nice and roasted on both sides. That means the flavor is going to be nice and intense. I said I was going to add chicken to this soup, and I definitely am, but I'm not going to add the chicken to my butternut squash and apple soup right now because I want to puree this. I'm going to get out my immersion blender, and once the butternut squash gets nice and soft and rehydrated, I'm just going to stick it in and puree it. If I add the chicken now, then what's going to happen is like what happened with my potato soup when I added the ham. It's going to be shredded into a lot of small pieces. If that's what you want, then it doesn't matter, but I'm envisioning the chicken pieces being a little bit bigger, So I'm going to soften the butternut squash, puree it, then add the chicken, which is already cooked, and then my spices, and then this soup will be ready. The butternut squash cooked for about 15 minutes, and as you can see, the apples have continued to break down and the butternut squash is getting nice and soft. I probably could have added the butternut squash a little bit sooner, maybe after the apple had cooked for 10 minutes. But like I said, I got busy with something. Now it's time to puree everything. So here I have my immersion blender, my secret weapon in the kitchen. I turned down the heat to low, just in case it splashes up. And now I'm just going to puree the soup. It only took about 45 seconds, maybe a minute, and now my butternut squash and apple soup is nice and silky smooth. Like I said, the base for this soup was some homemade chicken stock, and here's the chicken that I use to make the stock. I used about a pound of chicken leg quarters. I took off the skin, and then like I said, I boiled the chicken leg quarters with garlic, onion, celery, carrot, and bay leaf. The chicken's already cooked, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off the bone and add it to the soup. After adding the chicken, I brought my butternut squash and apple soup back to a boil for about 10 minutes. You can see there's a good amount of chicken. I tasted it, and although I like it, I think it needs a little bit of extra flavor. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but if you know me, you know I have a sweet tooth, you know I like things sweet, so I am going to add half a cup of apple juice. I think it's going to add a ton of not only apple flavor, but also sweetness. Here I have a 1/4 teaspoon each of salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. So that's going to go in. Honestly, I think I'm going to add more spices than what I just did. But as always, it's easier to add more later than to take away. So I'm going to taste it and see where I want to go from here. My butternut squash soup with apple and chicken is now ready to serve. It's cooked for a total of an hour and a half. And I added a total of 1 cup of apple juice, so I added more. And I also added a total of half a teaspoon each of salt, black pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder. It wasn't quite sweet enough for me, so I also added about a tablespoon of sugar. I'm sure you're not surprised. And when I finally sat down to try the soup, I fell in love with it immediately. This butternut squash soup with apple and chicken was absolutely delicious. What made it so good was the perfect combination of sweet and savory. This soup was sweet from the oven roasted butternut squash and the apple, and it was savory because of the chicken, chicken stock, and spices. The sweetness and savoriness were perfectly balanced, so it didn't seem odd to have garlic with apple. And unlike some sweet potato casserole recipes, nobody would have thought this tasted like a dessert. Although the soup was absolutely delicious as it was, if you want to switch things up, I think that adding more onions, like I did with my onion and cheese soup, would be a good option, and also adding some cheddar would be good in this. Some people like to put cheddar on their apple pie, so since this does have apple and it does have that savoriness in the background, I think it could work really well. I think a bit of cinnamon and or nutmeg would be interesting to try as well. Like I said, this butternut squash soup was absolutely fantastic, so if you like squash and you like apples and you're looking for something unique, delicious, and light, be sure to give this soup recipe a try. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.